So I have to admit, I paused for a second before shaking Ken's hand after hearing the story about subway swabbing. So welcome to day 3. Now I know it's day 3 also, and welcome to Silicon Valley. How many of you watch this great show on HBO? Okay, everybody. How many of you realize how dangerously close this show is to a documentary? Yeah. Okay, think about that the next time you're buying software from a company that looks like that one. So I actually did put that up for a reason. I wanted to start with the question, how many of you actually have worked at a company that looks like that one? Okay, a few people. How many of you work at companies that look more like that one? Okay, not surprising, most of you. Well, how many of you have actually worked at both at some point in your career? Oh, pretty good number. That's pretty good. So for the people who haven't worked at both, I'm going to let you in on a little secret. The people on the left are really envious of the people on the right. And the people on the right are really envious of the people on the left. And there's a good reason for that. If you're at one of these larger organizations, you kind of look at the small guys and you go, oh, I wish we could be that nimble. I wish we could be that quick. I'd love to be able to work really quickly and easily and not have all the bureaucracy and all the things that I have to go through to get anything done. Those guys have got it made. They've got agility. And the little guys are looking over at the big companies and going, man, we would kill to have the kind of resources that they have. And it's not just about the money. They've got all these different products. They've got all this data that they could bring together. Could you imagine if we could take the data from all these other products and bring it together and give it to our researchers? They could, completely improve our existing product, or we could create entirely new ones based on all of these other resources that they have in the organization. And we don't have all of that. We don't get the synergies that these big companies do. So the question is, why can't you have both? Well, if you're a little company, it's hard to have both because you don't have all the resources. But if you're a big company, why can't you have all of those synergies that come from having all these different assets, but also be agile? And that's kind of the way it's supposed to work. If you read the Harvard Business Review article, it'll tell you that you start out as an agile little organization with some hard work and a little bit of luck. You have a degree of success. You build on that success. It drives scale. You're starting to get more and more users, more and more service offerings. And then you start to get that synergy. And the synergy really helps you again, and that reinforces your success, and you've got this virtuous cycle. Everything is good. That's the way it's supposed to work. But the fact is, in the real world, when you start to achieve scale, the most common thing that happens is partitioning, right? So you start getting bigger, and the natural thing is, I've got to break things up. I got to make things manageable. I can't just keep making things, one thing bigger and bigger and bigger. I can't manage it. I need to break things down a little bit. And unfortunately, with the technology that we're all using these days, when you do that partitioning, the natural outcome from that is data silos, right? You start partitioning your business, you start partitioning your organization. Each one of them starts owning their own chunk of the data. And then with traditional relational technology, that ends up being a pretty concrete data silo. And if you've been here, if you were here yesterday, you heard a lot about what comes from data silos. The cost, the complexity, the risk. As projects get longer, risk goes up. And it really starts to erode the agility that got you to where you are in the first place. So the good news is you're a success and you've achieved scale. Congratulations. You now have the scale that gives you the bad news. You end up with silos. And the two things that you were really interested in having, the agility and the synergy, those were the two things that disappeared from the picture. It's just what you were after, now they're both gone. So let's take a closer look at why that is the case. And if you look at agility and you look at scale, we all kind of intuitively know that as scale goes up, agility goes down. We kind of all know that that's a natural outcome. But why is that? When you look at it, there's one thing that really comes to the fore, and it's this notion of coordination cost. As your scale goes up, you've got more things that you've got to coordinate, right? So if you're thinking back to that small company that would love to be able to get the data from one group and hand it off to the researchers from another group, well, you can't just go get the data and hand it off. You've got to figure out what were the agreements under which that data was collected. What are my rights to that data? Does that data contain any personally identifiable information? I'm not just going to willy-nilly hand off some data to researchers that contains people's social security numbers. I can't do that. You've got to coordinate your activities. You've got to deal with governance. And it's sometimes not just you, right? So there are times that you want to coordinate for your own benefit. There are times when you're forced to coordinate. You may have a regulator coming in and saying, hey, you've got all these different parts of your business. I want you to bring all of that together and give me an aggregated view of your risk. So you've got an external force that's pushing you into this coordination and increasing your coordination costs. And as your coordination costs go up, it's not just dollars, it's time and focus and human resources. That's what's killing your agility. So you might think, okay, well, I'm a good IT shop. I know I've got these coordination costs, but I'm going to get them under control. I'm going to get all my systems aligned. I'm going to get to a point where I've got everything working together properly. And at least I'm going to level out my coordination cost. I'll hit some plateau. Now I'll be stable. I'll be good. It's the cost of doing business, fine. But that's never the case, right? Because you want to build the next system, right? You want to add the next new trading system. You want to add the next new information service. You want to go off and acquire that other company and integrate all of their products and services into your company. So you never hit that plateau. And if you do hit that plateau, you're not going to be happy because it means your business is stagnant. In fact, you're going to keep adding to things and the coordination cost is going to keep going up. And it's going to go right off the edge of your slide. So this is a kind of a bleak picture, right? We've got these coordination costs going up. We've got low agility. As you saw yesterday in Gary's presentation, there's a lot of really high costs to these coordination activities like doing ETL to bring data together from all of these different sources and doing the data wrangling that Ken was just talking about. This is really impacting your business. So what can we do about it? What does it take to actually get out of this problem and give you a way of bringing down your coordination costs and bringing up your agility? Well, if you were here yesterday morning, you saw an absolutely superb presentation by David Gorbett, who walked you through kind of the real fundamentals and the characteristics of MarkLogic that make it possible to coordinate data really easily and effectively from multiple silos. And a lot of what he talked about yesterday is really applicable in bringing down that coordination cost and bringing your agility up, because it lets you bring together data from all of these sources across all of these different parts of your business to get those synergies that you want without having an immense cost of actually doing it. So that's great. MarkLogic is a really big help in letting you do that, but we're not stopping where we are. We're moving forward, and what I want to do now is tell you a little bit about what we're doing in MarkLogic 9 and how we're going to continue to address these kinds of issues and help you maintain your agility and keep your coordination costs down. And I should just pause because I think there's a problem with the clock. It says that I've got 35 minutes to tell you about MarkLogic 9, and I thought we said I would have 3 hours for this. Because that's what it's going to take to tell you all about MarkLogic 9. But I will give you an overview in 35 minutes, and then you can find me, you can find our engineers, you can find our product managers, and we can tell you more about it over the course of the conference. So not surprisingly, one of our big themes in MarkLogic 9 is data integration. Doing more to help you bring your data together. Once you've got that data together, making it the most secure place to keep that data, and then helping you manage it all. So if we start with data integration, one of the big areas that we're investing in is helping you bring that data together. And one of the biggest problems with bringing data together is knowing what the data means. So as David was talking about yesterday, you might have 3, 4, 5, 10 systems that all have the notion of a customer. What does that mean? What is a customer? So the very first thing we're doing in MarkLogic 9 is focusing on the semantics of data, the meaning of your data. What is a customer? What does it mean? And not just what is a customer and what is that business entity, but how does it relate to other things in your business? And today, if you think about it, you think about your business and you think about those business entities and where you capture the meaning of those entities. Well, you capture it by hard coding things into your applications, more than one application, so developers have it in their head what these entities mean, and they put that into code. You're hard coding it into your ETL scripts. It's in documents which are almost immediately out of date because things change. It's in entity relationship diagrams that are pasted on your wall. It's everywhere except in the database. The one system that would really like to understand what your data mean is the one place where you're not putting the meaning of your data. So in MarkLogic 9, we're introducing entity services. And entity services is that place where you can go to the database and describe your business entities and describe the relationships between these entities. And the database will keep track of that and make it available to you. Make it available to your applications. Make it available to any service that wants to understand the meaning and relationships between your business entities. And do it in a way that's consistent, right? If you've got 3 guys writing applications and each of them is trying to understand and have their own model of what these entities are, I guarantee you that they will be different and they will be divergent. If you can go to the database, describe it in one place, and have your applications actually query that data as an artifact, you can make that consistent across your applications. And then having that data also allows the database to be smart about what it does with this information, and it can start to do things for you. So if you've got entities like customers or partners or products or trades or counterparties, all of these sort of business level conceptual entities, you want to expose them to your applications and your overall architecture. And MarkLogic is fundamentally a REST-based database, fits really nicely into a service-oriented architecture or microservices architecture. Entity services, once you've defined an entity in the database can actually automatically for you create REST services over that entity. Can expose your customer with REST services automatically for you. It can build out frameworks that allow you to easily harmonize data from those multiple data sources that all have their different notions of how to represent a customer or a product or a trade. So entity services is one of these fundamental capabilities that we're exposing in MarkLogic 9 and that we're going to be adding to over time. And it's really one of these capabilities in my mind that's going to really change the way people build applications and build networks of services by bringing meaning to the data, not just dealing with low-level physical models. So we start off with the meaning of data. The next thing we do is we want to be able to query all of that information in really effective ways. And MarkLogic already has incredible query capabilities, incredible search capabilities, and in MarkLogic 9, we're adding the Optic API, which is a brand new query capability. I'm really excited about this. And the Optic API is called Optic because it lets you look at your data through different lenses. So MarkLogic is a document database, so it's natural to look at your data through the lens of documents, and we've got great interfaces for doing that. But sometimes you actually want to see your documents in a tabular form. You want to see data represented in a way where you might want to be able to do roll-ups or aggregates on the data. So it just might be natural to want to project your documents into a tabular form. You might want to take information from multiple documents and bring them together and project them into a tabular form. You might want to look at your semantics through a semantics lens or through another lens. And what the Optic API does is it allows you to choose the view of the data that you want that makes most sense for the problem that you're trying to solve in the moment. So your data is your data. It's all the same. It's all stored once. It's all stored in a great document model. But the Optic API says, sort of irrespective of how that data is stored, I'm going to let you view it in the way that's natural to the problem that you're trying to solve. And to do this effectively, we built a brand new type of index underlying all of this data. And this is not something the developer has to worry about. MarkLogic takes care of that index for you. It will use that index. It will optimize your queries based on the index and the data. It will distribute your queries across the cluster for efficient operation. So it's a great set of underlying technologies that make the Optic API possible, make it performant, make it practical. And we also have a capability of templating your data. And what that does is it allows you to describe the information in your documents and tell the database about the pieces that you'd like to be able to view in this way and project out. And this templating mechanism happens as your data is being ingested into MarkLogic, and it informs the data that gets automatically dealt with by this index. So the Optic API is a great new capability for allowing you to write applications more quickly, more effectively, with more power. And all of the work that we're doing on the Optic API, all of the optimization work, all of the index work, the templating work, all of that work that's going to make Optic great is also enhancing our SQL capability. So you may know that MarkLogic has had SQL query capability for quite some time, since before I joined the company. And with all of this new capability that we're adding in for the Optic API, we're able to take advantage of that in our SQL implementation. So you're going to see a more robust, more powerful, faster implementation of SQL in MarkLogic 9. And that's really important to us. It may sound odd, given that we're a next-generation database, but SQL is important to us because we know that every enterprise in the world has relational databases and relational data in it. We need to make it easy to bridge from that world into the next generation. We need to make it easy for you to use the tools that you already have that may use ODBC to get at data. So great tools like Tableau, for example, you want to be able to use those effectively with MarkLogic. So we're putting a lot of effort into enhancing our SQL and ODBC implementations. So you're able to describe your business entities, describe the relationships between them. You can query them using this great new query capability called Optic, but you also need to get data into MarkLogic and get data out of MarkLogic. And we've got great tools for doing that today, tools like MarkLogic Content Pump, MLCP. But in MarkLogic 9, we're adding a new set of functionality called the Data Movement SDK. And the idea here is we want to give you the tools that you need to get data easily into and out of MarkLogic and integrate it into the flows that you already have. Especially relational. We want to make it really easy for you to get your relational data into MarkLogic, and we want to do all the heavy lifting for you. So all of the orchestration of large bulk movement of data, all of the parallelization that you want to do to effectively use all of your cluster resources to get that data in quickly. We're going to do that heavy lifting for you in the SDK. I'm looking at the engineer who's the primary implementer for this. We're going to do all that heavy lifting for you so that you can easily integrate this into your flows, whether it's streaming data into MarkLogic, doing batch loads, integrating with tools like Camel and Spark. So the data movement SDK is a really powerful component of the overall data integration story. So that's just kind of a really brief overview of some of the things that we're doing to help you better get data into MarkLogic and make better use of it. But once you've done that, now you've taken data from all of these really critical systems in your business, data that individually is really sensitive, really important data. You've brought it together into this unified data hub. You brought it together into MarkLogic. Well, it better be secure, right? It's not just the security of one silo worth of data, it's the security of your most sensitive data from across your entire organization. And MarkLogic is already an incredibly secure product. We're the only NoSQL database with common criteria certification. We work in some of the most demanding environments in military, in intelligence, in civilian law enforcement. We've got great security in the product, and we're going to go even further in MarkLogic 9. And the very first thing we're doing along that line is we're adding an advanced encryption capability to MarkLogic. We're moving encryption into the core of MarkLogic, and we're doing it the right way. So the thing about encryption is everybody focuses on encryption algorithms. Say, oh, you got to use the same algorithms that the government uses. You got to use the same algorithms that the military uses. And once you use those algorithms, you're going to be really secure. Well, that's the easy part of encryption, right? We figured that out. There's great standards for actually doing the encryption and the decryption of the bits. That's not what people try to break when they're breaking encrypted systems. What they try and break is the overall system. They try and look at what are the weak points in the integration of those encryption algorithms into the overall platform. How are keys managed, right? If you can find the keys to your encryption algorithms, then the encryption algorithms are meaningless. So key management is really critical. How are you breaking up the things that you're encrypting? Are you encrypting everything with the same key? Are you encrypting lots of different things with lots of different keys? Those are the kinds of things that differentiate between a really good encryption solution and what I'll call a checkbox encryption solution. It's easy to have a checkbox encryption solution. It's really hard to have a truly good, well thought out, architected, system-wide encryption solution, and that's what we're doing in MarkLogic 9. And the first piece of that, if you look at a sort of traditional file system-based encryption over here, you've got your data on disk and it's encrypted, and if somebody breaks into your data center and steals the disk, you're golden. They're not going to be able to get anything off of it. But that's not really the interesting case, right? The interesting case is somebody, hacks into your world and tries to get at the data. And the problem with file system level encryption is the data is encrypted on your disk, but as it goes through the file system, it gets decrypted. So by the time it comes out of the file system, it's already unprotected before it ever goes into the database. And if you've got a rogue system administrator or somebody who's hacked in and has gotten root access to your systems, you're done. The data's gone. Doesn't matter that it's encrypted on disk, it's gone. So the very first thing you need to do is move the encryption into the database. And by doing that, it means the data that's coming through, as it passes through the file system, it remains encrypted. It only gets decrypted once it's in the core of the database. And again, what's really critical there is that when it is in the core of the database, all of the key management practices, all of the distribution of what pieces get encrypted by what keys, that's all managed in a really sophisticated manner. And that protects you not just from the hacker, it protects you from the insider threat of your sysadmin. And then we take it a step further and say, okay, well, now you got DBAs. Well, you want to go even further and say, I'm going to separate out the capabilities that a DBA has versus the capabilities that a security administrator has. And I'm going to limit what the DBA can do, and I'm going to make a new role for the security administrator to be the person who can manage the keys and set up the configuration so that you limit even what a DBA can do. And those are the kinds of things that you need to look at in an encryption solution to tell whether you're really getting something that's going to protect your data in the best possible way. And that's what we're doing in MarkLogic 9. This is going to be a really terrific capability. And by the way, this is not just encrypting the data in your database. It's also encrypting the configuration of your database, the modules you're loading in your database, the logs in your database. It's really encrypting all the data in your database. So that's great. So now you've got encryption, you're protecting your data, but you know, sometimes you want to actually use your data. You don't want to keep it encrypted all the time. So we're adding some new capabilities for data privacy. And the first one is element level security. So you're probably familiar that with MarkLogic, we've already got role-based security down to the level of a document. So, you know, a document being sort of a record. So you can go down to the level of a document, you can put very fine-grained controls over who has access and which roles have access to that document. But sometimes you want to go beyond even that. You want to go down to the elements of a document and you want to say, this particular piece of this particular document, I need to have this role to be able to see. So in this example here, we've got a document and it's got a couple of different pieces and they have different classifications. One piece is classified secret and another piece is classified top secret. And using element level security, I can say that only people who are in the top secret role, when they query the database, they'll be able to actually see the top secret information. So at query time, we're applying these security rules and being able to give back the data that's appropriate for that user at the sub-document level, at the element level. And a user who only has secret clearance would not see any of that information, nor would they have any idea that it was ever there. Okay? So again, at query time for anything you're looking at, any of those down to the finest grain element, we can control the visibility of those. And a civilian actually would see basically nothing. So this is query time, element level security, very, very fine-grained control of your data. But sometimes you're not interested in individual queries, you're interested in whole data sets. So go back to that example I was talking about before where you want to take some data and give it to a researcher. But you want to redact the information. You want to take that information, you want to give them access to just the non-sensitive components from the perspective of that particular user, or for the rights of that particular user. So this is the kind of redaction that most people think of. You know, it's a CIA document that's got most of the words marked out. We're doing something just a little bit more sophisticated. So if you've got a document, and this is an example of a document that you may want to give to a researcher, it might have personally identifiable information in it, PII. And we want to get rid of that before we give it to a researcher. So with redaction, you can set up rules. And one of the rules might be just make that information disappear. So all the documents that come out, transform them such that that information is gone. Okay, that's great. But you want to be able to do things that are more sophisticated than that. Sometimes you want that information there, but you just want it masked, right? So you want to get rid of most of the information in a social security number. You might want to mask a phone number. So we give you the capabilities of masking information, and we give you a tremendous amount of flexibility in how it's masked, how it's defined, which things you want to redact, and then what to do with it. Should we just make up some information to put up there? Should we put a cryptic hash in there? Do you want to supply your own rules for how to redact that information? You can do it all with MarkLogic because we've got server-side processing. We can also do dictionary-based redaction. So I want names in there because my tools might be expecting a name, but I don't want real names in there. So we'll have a dictionary, and you can replace names with sort of nonsense names, but do it in a consistent way. So when your researcher is using this information, they'll get consistent results. It just won't have private information in it. And this is great for that use case where you want to hand it off to a researcher or somebody in another department who can see one piece of the information but not another. But it's also really, really good just in operations. So, you've got your big production system, you've got a QA environment, you want to make your QA environment look as much as possible like your production environment. You would love to have the real production data in your QA environment so that you could do really good testing. But oftentimes you don't want to put that production data into your QA environment because your QA environment doesn't have the protections that you need in order to safeguard real production data. With redaction, you can take that data from MarkLogic, you can export it, you can redact it, and you can get a version that you can use in your QA environment, provide the most seamless transition from one environment to the other, have the best set of testing happen without compromising the privacy of your company data or your customer data. So that's redaction, and that's one of those things that we think is going to be really useful in basically every industry. There's nobody that we've talked to in all the different verticals that we work in that hasn't been interested in keeping their information safer and more private. Okay, so now you've got your data integrated in MarkLogic. You're protecting it using all these great protection features. You're building more and more applications. You got more environments. You've got your dev environment, your QA environment, your test environment. You're running some things on premise. You're running some things on the cloud. You've got your site in New York replicating to your site in London, replicating to your site in Singapore. You got a lot of MarkLogic going on. So we're going to give you tools that are going to help you manage and operate those environments even better. And the first one of those is MarkLogic Ops Director. So Ops Director is a brand new GUI tool that will complement and add to the existing tools that we have for managing MarkLogic. Remember, we've got GUIs that allow you to manage MarkLogic today. All of our management can be accessed through our REST APIs as well, so it can all be scripted and put into flows. Ops Director is going to be that new layer that gives you a single pane of glass to look across all of those different environments, all of those different clusters, all of those different regions, cloud, on-premises, whatever it might be. You'll get a single view to manage, monitor, and optimize MarkLogic. And like Entity Services, Ops Director is one of these foundational capabilities that we're releasing in MarkLogic 9, and we're using it as a platform. We're going to continue to add to the capabilities of Ops Director over time. And this is a quick view of what Ops Director will look like. You can see we're in the dashboard view now, looking at some of the key statistics across these clusters. We can go up and look at a cluster view, look at our different clusters, drill down into specific hosts, see metrics on those hosts, and operate across all of these different environments. So MarkLogic Ops Director, we think, is going to be a really big step forward in the manageability of many MarkLogic clusters and applications. The next thing we're adding is telemetry. So telemetry, the basic notion there is we want to allow you to proactively send MarkLogic information about how your cluster is operating. And this opt-in capability will allow us to have all the data that we need so that if you call with a question or an issue, we'll already have the information that we need on hand to help support you in the most efficient and the fastest manner possible. So telemetry will collect some information from your system, obviously won't collect any of your data, just collecting information about database logs, that sort of thing. With your approval, we'll automatically upload it to MarkLogic to help us with that interaction with you. But also over time, as we're collecting this information, it will allow us in the future to look at predictive capabilities. Can we see trending in your data? Can we contact you before there's a problem based on what we're seeing in the operation of your system? So telemetry is one of these new capabilities that will help us support you better and in the future actually help us help you before any issues arise. The next thing in terms of manageability I think is really, really cool. So we have a lot of features in MarkLogic that are focused on non-disruptive operation. So when you're adding a node to a cluster, you don't want to have to take the cluster down to do that. When you're removing nodes from a cluster, right? So you've just gone through some peak load, now you want to shrink your cluster back down again. You don't want to have to take your cluster down to remove nodes. You don't want to have to stop operating while data is being rebalanced across your cluster. You want it to be non-disruptive. And that's what we've done with our elasticity capability and our tiered storage capability and more of the functionality in MarkLogic. We allow you to do all of those things online non-disruptively. Well, now the next things we're being asked for is we don't want to take downtime even when we're upgrading our cluster. We want to be able to install new software on our cluster, move to a new version, and take no downtime. We want our app to keep running, we want the cluster to keep running, we want the database to keep running. So in MarkLogic 9, we're introducing rolling upgrades. And the idea there is, let's say you've got a cluster and you're running, the latest and greatest version of MarkLogic version 8. You want to be able to go into your system and actually install MarkLogic on a node, and you can see that node has MarkLogic on it, MarkLogic 9 with that blue ring. And you do that installation, the cluster keeps running. And now that installation rolls through the rest of your cluster. And as it's rolling through, the cluster never goes down as these nodes are getting MarkLogic installed. And once MarkLogic 9 is installed on all of the nodes in the cluster, it sort of instantaneously converts over to acting like MarkLogic 9. So we give you the ability to take a running system and upgrade it without taking any downtime on your application. So more of the promise of non-disruptive operation. And for customers like all of you who are enterprise customers running mission-critical apps on MarkLogic, this is really important. You don't want to have any downtime, even planned downtime. So that's a really quick overview of MarkLogic 9. I'm glossing over an amazing quantity of things. In fact, I want to just mention one more thing. But actually, I'm going to mention 4 more things because I couldn't whittle it down to one more thing. It's kind of one more thing. So what we're doing, in addition to all of the new technology and capability that we're adding, we're continuing to invest in our fundamental technologies. In MarkLogic 9, bitemporal is getting even better. So we added bitemporal in MarkLogic 8. really, really powerful capability that underpins everything that we do. Bitemporal data, bitemporal geospatial, bitemporal semantics. Everything becomes bitemporal in MarkLogic 8. In MarkLogic 9, we're adding and refining the bitemporal capability based on the feedback we've had from all of you over the last year and a half about how we could make it even better, how we could make it work even better in regulatory situations and in dealing with auditors and regulators. So new capabilities in bitemporal are coming in MarkLogic 9. Tiered storage, absolutely fantastic feature that helps you control the cost of your growing storage. You know, you might be in an industry where you need to keep data for 7 years or 10 years for regulatory reasons. Tiered storage really helps you do that in a cost-effective way. Well, in MarkLogic 9, we're really enhancing tiered storage with a sophisticated policy-driven engine. So you'll be able to create really powerful rules that describe what data should go in what tier and when data should move from tier to tier. So that's going to make tiered storage even more effective, but it also does something else. So we're having all these policies, and the database understands those policies. And because the database understands those policies, it can now be smart about how it does queries across all these different tiers. You don't have to think about, well, I've got, my archive data in this other tier, so I want to attach a database over there and do a query over there and not impact my production area. The database knows that. It knows, based on these policies, where this information is. And when you do a query, it can be smart about saying, you know what? I don't need to touch tier 1 to execute this query. I can do this and only use data that's off on one of these other tiers. And it can be smart about the way it does that. You don't have to think about it. The database thinks about it. So really powerful new capability in tiered storage. And then there's geospatial. So, when we first added geospatial to MarkLogic, it was mostly, military and people like that who cared about geospatial. Well, now you can't find anybody who doesn't care about location, right? Insurance cares about location, healthcare cares about location, retail cares about location, oil and gas cares about location. Everybody cares about location. So geospatial is a really critical component in MarkLogic, and we're doing a couple of really cool things in MarkLogic 9. First thing we're doing is we're increasing the precision of our geospatial capability. So you can get really fine-grained about where your objects are and get really precise about how you're locating things. And then to complement that, we're increasing the capabilities of our query mechanism with geospatial. So now you'll be able to do, in MarkLogic 9, you'll be able to do complex queries about regions and how regions relate to one another. So it's not just about points and circles and lines. It's about, how does this arbitrary region that might be the shape of a county or a voting district, if you want a really complicated region, and how does that relate to your other geospatial information? So much higher precision, double precision, and really powerful new query capabilities coming with geospatial. And cloud. I think by law you're not allowed to do a tech presentation without talking about the cloud. So I felt compelled to bring it up. MarkLogic works incredibly well in the cloud. We've been running in AWS. Somebody reminded me that we started running in AWS in 2009, which unbelievably is 7 years ago at this point. You can go to the Amazon Marketplace, you can get MarkLogic for 99 cents an hour, use it, it works great. We're adding more capabilities, more cloud capabilities in MarkLogic 9. We run not just in AWS, but also in Azure, also in Google Cloud. Features like elasticity that we've had in the product for quite a while now make MarkLogic really well suited for the cloud. And we'll be adding to that in MarkLogic 9. But the thing I really wanted to mention was that it's not just the features that you think of as cloud features that make MarkLogic great for the cloud. It's other features as well. Think about encryption. Encryption isn't a cloud feature, right? It's a general security feature. But now, with the kind of encryption that we're adding and the kind of fine-grained control and the fine-grained key management we have, you can start to rethink, would it be okay for me to keep some of my data in the cloud where up to this point I haven't really considered it? If I'm now protected from the system administrator, would it be all right? Can I move my data to the cloud? Can I look at a feature like tiered storage and say, gee, with tiered storage and the array of different kinds of storage options I have in the cloud, from really fast tier 1 storage all the way out to S3 and Glacier types of storage, and couple that with the fact that I can have really big instances and I can also have really small instances, that means that you can have a killer solution in the cloud that allows you to really increase your storage footprint at very, very low cost and keep it live, keep it queryable. So there's a lot of capability in MarkLogic 9 that you may not think of specifically as cloud capability, but when taken together, really make MarkLogic an incredibly good platform for use in the cloud. So that's MarkLogic 9. And for everything I've mentioned, there's 10 features that I haven't mentioned, and I couldn't even put them all here. You're going to be seeing more and more about MarkLogic, and we invite you to join the Early Access Program. Our Early Access Program allows you to get your hands on MarkLogic 9 now, start using it, start experimenting with it, start writing your applications with it. We've had customers in the past who have been on our Early Access Program and were able to go into production with a new application 1 week after we shipped the GA, because they had been using early access all along.
Okay.
So please go to ea.marklogic.com, sign up for the early access program, and you can start to get your hands on all of the capabilities that I talked about. And early access 2 literally just shipped this week. So the engineering team has been working incredibly hard to get this ready for you. Early access version 2 is ready now. So I want to leave you with one final thought. So every year I try to find an industry luminary who's said something or had a quote about something that kind of underpins what I've been saying. And this year the industry luminary I found was Al Franken. Some of you may not realize that he's into IT. You may know him more for his Saturday Night Live days or his political days. But he really has some keen insights, and one in particular I'd like to share with you that has to do with coordination cost, with agility. He was really focused on that. And he talked about kind of what a futile exercise it is to try and go out across your entire world of existing systems and trying to cause them to come into some uniformity. And he talks about having a much more natural, much more comfortable solution and approach. And what he said was, it's easier to put on slippers than to carpet the whole world. So I think you'll find that rather than trying to change the whole world of your relational silos, it's a much better solution to bring all that data together with MarkLogic. Thank you.